to the Lodgers, and I feel weird sounding so chirpy after what, if I did my job, will have been a terribly horrific intro. But here we are, and I'm of course joined by Kate Renabaum.
Hello.
And this week we are here to talk about the next to last Lynch directed episode of the original run, and that is of course the 7th episode of season 2, Lonely Souls. And it's a biggin for reasons that will be obvious to anyone who's watched the show before or anyone who has been watching up to date, along with us and now has seen this. And so, we're going to, obviously there's much to discuss, so many things, which is, one of the reasons that it's just us this week. I don't believe that will be the case next week, just so everyone understands how this is going to work. At least this is the plan. So this week we are only discussing this episode. However, over the next 3 weeks, we are going to be discussing a lot of episodes. And that's because for our sanity and yours, dear listeners, we will be accelerating the pace of this podcast when we discuss the second half of the season. Then we will be spending one episode on the series finale. One episode with a very special guest on Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, and then, my friends, it will be time for the new stuff.
Yeah.
So every time I think about that, I'm just like, what the hell? This is a real thing that's happening, or so they say.
I can't believe it. Like, watching 1 hour of Lynch-directed Twin Peaks for this episode of the podcast was... it's mind-blowing. Like, this episode is amazing, and it's hard to wrap my head around the fact that there will be 18 hours of possibly equivalent material coming out in the next little while is mind-blowing.
Yeah, and we're all going to be expected to talk about it week to week and have, good opinions. And I promise you now, there will be bad opinions. And that's why we're here, to hopefully not do that. But, we're not there yet. I guess I don't want to do too much more anticipating, but I couldn't help but think about that as I was watching Lonely Souls for obvious reasons. We should also mention this episode was written by Mark Frost. So before we do get into it, I understand that you've been a Twitter on the Twitters and wanted to mention something.
Well, I have to admit, I did not do much of the work. Somebody else looped me into this conversation, which I'm glad that happened. But so I think. This might have been an episode I think we talked about this in the podcast episode for episode 7, the finale of season 1, in relation particularly to that shot of Jacoby's eye as he's lying on the ground, the zoom into Jacoby's eye. We talked with Ricky about this notion that there were a handful of shots throughout the series that were looked like kind of video, like lower grade video shots. And I talked about them as video inserts. And the reason I did that is that there is a pretty common tradition, like with television in the sort of 90s through even the early 2000s, where if they needed to do a quick cover shot or go back to film something that they had forgot or hadn't realized they needed, they would use video camera. Often it was cheaper. And again, it wasn't noticeable until it was upgraded to things like Blu-ray and 1080p, when all of a sudden you could really tell the difference between celluloid and video. So that's what I thought was going on. That does not appear to have been the case, however. So I was looped into a conversation with, I don't know this person's full name because it's not on Twitter, but someone who was one of the co-producers for the Blu-ray box set that came out, Missing Pieces, where they did amazing restorations on the episodes and Fire Walk with Me, et cetera, et cetera. So this guy worked on the restoration of it, and his Twitter handle is at DougPA, Dougpa, like DUGPA, I think. And according to him, all of those sequences were originally done on film, but when they went back to do the restoration to 1080p, there were a handful that they couldn't find. So, they, spent days and days and days, if not weeks, it sounds like, searching through whatever this material they had for a whole handful of shots, and they just couldn't find the original celluloid. So it sounds like they were stuck having to use later something that, when it had been broadcast on television or whatever later, there had been a kind of SD, standard definition version of it that had been used, and that's what they had access to. And the list of shots is quite interesting. It includes Jacoby's eye. the giant light ball, which I don't think we've seen yet. I think that comes later. Also Briggs.
Spoiler alert for the light ball.
Exactly. There's a light ball. There's also Briggs sitting in a chair of sort of fire later at one point. That was also one of these missing shots. And I thought this was really interesting. That's either the pilot or like one of the 2 episodes after the pilot. You get that shot where Grace Zabriskie like superimposes Laura's head on Donna's face. And in the version on the, that we have access to now, it's much lower quality. But that was simply one of the ones where they couldn't find the original, apparently, like the original negative that was used to do that. Anyway, I find this really fascinating because, as it turned out in this discussion with people, like what is being shown on Netflix and apparently also Showtime, because Showtime is rerunning these episodes right now, is definitely not the version that they put all of this amazing restoration work into. Like the stuff on Netflix and Showtime is a version where they are using this kind of lower quality stuff. Oh, sorry, I'm not explaining this very well. So it sounds like Netflix is using this one where they were operating with the kind of video shots. However, some of them on the Blu-ray have been fixed. Like they did have the celluloid to fix them. For example, Jacoby's eye on the Blu-ray is the original celluloid shot. So again, there's a handful that they could never find, and those are even bad on the Blu-ray. But it sounds like there's significantly more that were left as kind of worse quality on Netflix because they weren't using the nicer restoration. So again, just maybe a slight pitch for people who are true kind of like cinephile quality nerds that, the Blu-ray and restoration and archival work like really matters. And so maybe seek out the stuff if you can on Blu-ray, because not only with the video quality image, but also again, I think I've said this before, the color filtering is very different on their Blu-rays. It's much truer to what Lynch had originally envisioned with like really red saturation. So anyway.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me that Netflix didn't do their due diligence when it came to video quality?
Yes.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, I know. I wonder if anybody who's listening to this knows this. It probably, like, I don't know if they're using an HD version of like the I don't know, a DVD set or so. I don't know what it is, but clearly there's some other version of the show floating around where the colors have been turned down and there's this video stuff because Showtime is using it as well. So anyway.
There you go.
The nerd check-in for anybody who cares about that level of detail around this stuff.
Kate, it's the Twin Peaks fan base. They all care. I promise you. Or the vast majority of them do. All right. So without any more ado, I guess we should get into Lonely Souls. And I mean, we're alerted to the fact that we're right back in Lynchland with him directing right from what I believe is the opening shot of the Bookhouse Boys plus Philip sort of lined up this is for the credit sequence, so you've got the supporting credits are happening at the same time. They're all lined up against the wall and they've all got their piping hot coffee. And the whole shot is probably about 2 minutes. The average shot length, I would guess, of this episode is at least double what it is for a standard Twin Peaks episode. It's such an amazing opening shot, and particularly, I shouldn't just say the shot, but the way that it works with performance and music as well. The way that it's a sort of a whimsical moment, and then Philip cuts in with a repeat performance of his speech from the last episode, which is again another strange decision because you don't often get people repeating whole chunks of dialogue like that. It's almost like a previously on.
Yeah.
And then you have the theme swelling up, and it's suddenly without a cut, it's suddenly an ominous moment again. We haven't had a change of angle. We haven't had a change of anything except for Philip's speech and the music. And then he finishes the speech, and the music fades out, and it's right back to whimsy with no edit.
Yeah, I love that. I thought it was a great kind of comment from Lynch right away to sort of like, I don't know, a formal kind of humorous touch almost, this idea of, Philip. It's like as if Philip walks around under a cloud of like this ominous sort of backstory, but everybody else is just operating in this sort of very daily kind of like, Coop is like, okay, so we have to get the warrant, right? And that's what the music cuts out, and all of a sudden you're just sort of back in this daily moment. That made me laugh out loud, actually.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about sort of the Lynch rupture before, but I think this might be the only instance where the Lynch rupture is used to like comic effect, or like where he is able to summon all these almost like cartoonish levels of menace, only to like discard it seconds later, again without a cut or anything. And it's a very like, Lynch isn't often discussed as being a self-aware filmmaker. In fact, he's usually described as being the opposite of being this very like, instinctual, working from this almost primitive place. But this sequence feels not like that at all. It feels like a wry and we should remember also that Lynch is in the shot. And I also noticed that when his name appears on the screen as having directed it, he's exactly center frame. And I couldn't help but wonder if all this was intentional.
That's funny. I find that sequence to be many things, but I think there's a sort of early, maybe formal kind of gesture towards things that we're going to keep coming back to throughout the episode in terms of Lynch's direction. But, maybe Lynch's sort of commentary here on a kind of formal set of patterns and maybe politics even that other shows tend to fall into, which is this idea of cutting space up into scenes, right? I mean, another director might take this scene where you would have all of the characters maybe standing in the same space, and yet you would be cutting into kind of individual encounters between the men, right? And instead of that, Lynch very purposefully sort of has them all line up in this like planar kind of way in front of the camera, and then they just turn to each other, and the dialogue itself kind of separates them into scenes. And you get this sense that it very much is these sort of individual moments, and yet Lynch just sort of refuses to take them out of this kind of overall space, right? I mean, you move from Philip's kind of thing with the music to Coop. Gordon Cole has kind of two conversations. Coop talks to Hawk, and they just sort of turn to each other, and it moves down the line, right? I mean, I just thought that was great. It's like a sort of silent film sort of way of organizing people in space almost. It's quite unusual now. Yeah.
Right. And he takes what could have been, 10 minutes worth of setup and exposition and just crams it all into that one shot, which I get. There's an economy of storytelling, visual storytelling to Lynch episodes that is just virtuosic, and that not many other directors can really approach. God, what next?
Well, there's a couple of really spectacular sequences at the beginning. I mean, I think this certainly is not my absolute favorite, far from my favorite scene in the whole show, but it's worth mentioning just because it's still interesting, is the, maybe the use of Lynch's, handle on noise in the sequence at the Great Northern early on, where Philip Gerard, ostensibly, points to Ben, like freaks out when Ben comes into the room. But, I mean, that sequence is such a kind of great example of Lynch's sort of lack of interest in making people comfortable in any kind of way. Because that scene is a quite straightforward scene, right? I mean, anybody else, it's like you have Coop and Truman sort of picking people up and marching them in front of Gerard, and Gerard saying no, no, no. And it could be the most boring scene. Like, there's just very little actually going on in it. And yet, because of this structure that Lynch invents with the, whatever that is, like a sailors convention, like people in the Navy's convention of like rubber ball bouncing enthusiasts or some nonsense, like who knows what this is, but they're all standing around bouncing these balls, right? And like all of the voices in the lobby and this like cacophonous space that you're in with the repetition of the balls, and like it creates a level of sonic discomfort that is, excessive and just sort of confusing. Like, as a viewer, you're like, why is this so unpleasant and horrible, even before Ben comes into it?
Yeah.
I just, that kind of stuff I think is really interesting.
I'm just trying to imagine Lynch conceiving of that sequence and like explaining how it was going to be done and like casting extras and stuff. Like, I want sailors and I want balls and a lot of them. And that's I think honestly that was probably the entire conception of the sequence.
Probably. I was thinking about that a lot rewatching this time and knowing maybe more about the kind of production model for the show, in the sense, and I didn't find anybody specifically speaking to it in relation to this episode, but I've definitely heard people talk about how Frost and others would write these like really detailed scripts, and then when Lynch was directing, Lynch would often very much go off script. Like it wasn't, and I've heard that particularly in relation to the finale, so it's possible that he was sort of more on script with some of the other episodes. But one does get the sense that Lynch very much took liberties around maybe following every scene that was on the page or something. Again, because for people who don't know this, people who write screenplays or scripts, there's a certain number of pages per minute of the television show or the movie, because people estimate, well, you're going to have characters talking pretty regularly all the time, and so you can say that this much time is going to pass according to these much words on the page. And by that logic, Lynch's scripts would be half as long as a regular television script, because Lynch takes so much more time and space to do other things that are not dialogue focused. And so anyway, I suspect there was some reworking maybe of what Frost had envisioned for this episode. But
well, yeah, the way I imagine it is like the first half or even 3/4 of this episode is paced pretty much like a standard Twin Peaks episode. There's a lot of characters, there's a lot of dialogue. And I just imagine Lynch getting that teleplay and just getting to the sequence with Gerard in the hotel, and he's just like, well, could we do it with sailors? And they were just like, yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. The next sequence is another amazing example of a scene that you could very much imagine being done in a completely different way, in a way that would strip all of these other fascinating kind of layers of experience that Lynch finds in it. But the next scene is the sequence where you open on the painting of Missoula, Montana, and the camera moves across a whole series of Laura's images in photos, a record player, and then you get to Leland and Sarah sitting on the couch. And if you freeze it for a second, you can see that the photo of Laura is framed right between them in the way that the image is set up. And then Maddie comes and sits between them. And I don't think I'd ever noticed it before, because I had been sort of more focused on maybe the overt narrative developments in that scene, which is Maddie tells Leland and Sarah she's leaving. And there's an exchange between them, right? I mean, Leland and Sarah are upset that Maddie is leaving. Although, and we'll maybe come back to this later, but Leland's response plays into a larger arc of what's going on with that character in this episode. But anyway, so if you're focused on that, you maybe kind of miss some of the really fascinating stuff that Lynch is just doing with the space, which is, anybody else, again, you maybe just would have a series of kind of reverse shots where you have characters, mid close-ups of characters' heads talking to each other. This is all one take, as far as I can remember. It's all one take.
It is.
Yeah, it is. Okay. And the family is sitting on this couch, and they are so far removed from the camera. They're quite far back by, traditional standards of a sort of dialogue-heavy scene. They're quite far back from the camera. But more than that, you have all of this kind of crazy accoutrement of the domestic space in cluttering the image around them. So you have a sort of cabinet. I can't remember, maybe it's the record player, but you have a big cabinet on one side of them that takes up almost half of the image for a lot of it. You have these other kind of tables. You have a lamp sort of over them, and they're squished together on this little couch. And the level of kind of constraint feeling and menacing feeling of this image, towards Maddie in the middle, but the other two characters as well, of this sort of domestic kind of unpleasant constraint is really remarkable.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot going on in that sequence, but it hadn't really occurred to me. But you're right, they feel very boxed in, which is deliberately ironic, because Madeline is talking about how she needs to escape Twin Peaks, because at that point that would be your thought, is I need to get the out of here. Because people keep thinking I'm my dead cousin, and it's getting weird, and this weird, boring guy keeps hitting on me. But
this robot in a leather jacket won't leave me alone.
Ned Flanders' nephew keeps following me around. Sorry, James. But sorry, not sorry. But, and also, while this is happening, I just wanted to note that at scoring the sequence, it's very, very rare that we get non-Badalamenti music scoring any sequence. I was going to say we get Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World, but I'm not sure why, but they opted for a different recording than the one we're mostly familiar with from other films. It's a little bit faster. It's got this long spoken word intro.
It's a live recording is how I had heard it described as well, apparently.
Is it? I wonder if they just couldn't get the rights to the studio recording, or if it was a little bit cheaper to use the live version. I don't know if there was a specific reason, but it's cool that they found one that has that sort of wistful intro.
No, I find that I mean the song very much plays into a set of sort of emotional properties that we are, I guess. I mean, I'm talking about it as if the secret of who killed Laura Palmer isn't going to be revealed until we start talking about that scene. But I guess it is worth talking about this episode from the vantage of someone who doesn't know what the development is with Laura Palmer's killer, because you're watching this sequence and I still to this day find that moment, that sort of emotional landscape between the three characters quite heartbreaking when Maddie says, I'm going to leave, and Sarah is clearly devastated, right? And Leland is obviously upset as well, but shifts gears very quickly and realizes that, of course, it's, not very fair for them to be expecting that their grief will be the job of this young woman. And so Leland says, of course you have to leave. We completely understand. But there is and Sarah's reactions are very strange. But anyway, you have, at the end, the scene ends with them saying, I love you to each other, and it feels very kind of, like the family really does love each other. And you have this Armstrong song playing over everything, and I don't know, and we'll come back to it again later, but I think it's important to note how much the show from the early on is kind of putting out this notion of love as a really strong element of what's going on here, and it's going to keep coming back. But anyway.
Mm-hmm. And it's important that we get one last glimpse of the real Leland, or perhaps the real Leland. As we mentioned before, we never really got to know the real Leland. But in the glimpses that we do get when he's not around Ben Horn, he seems like a very lovely man.
Yeah.
And we get one last glimpse of that here, and it makes sense that it's far away.
That's interesting, yeah. The real Leland. We should keep talking about that, this idea of the real Leland, because I think there's some interesting stuff there with, even this fact that, like, in the quote-unquote real Leland, you never quite get any kind of real grounding over what you think is the real Leland. Like, as you say, this idea that he's such a different person when he's around Ben from when he's around Sarah and Laura. It's like there's already a very strange level of, perfidiousness there or something.
Mm-hmm. And I think the easiest segue here is to talk about Ben and his... Again, another long sequence between him and Audrey, where she finally confronts him about his role in the end of Laura's life. It really shouldn't work at this point that we have yet another character, like, sort of break down and say, you know what? Like, yes, I did sleep with Laura, and yes, I loved her. He's literally, like, the 17,000th character to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But, god damn it, that theme perks up. And the dialogue pivots and the performance pivots, and you're just like, they got me again with this shit. Like, really.
I know. And I find that scene with Ben and the photo, I find it very, it's very strange because, again, I mean, and what's his name? Richard Beamer is great as Ben Horn in that scene, and he's able to move through such a kind of level of different reactions, like ranging from shame, which is not something we've really ever seen from him so far. So that's a sort of interesting reaction. This idea of
this
sort of
is
shame.
What it takes, yeah.
Exactly, in front of Audrey, but and she asks him if he killed her, and he picks up that photo, and the thing that I find fascinating about it is Beamer's performance, and again, I'm looking at this through hindsight eyes, so I have no idea how this played to people watching it for the first time. It's possible it might have just read as very malevolent, but I feel like that the reading from Beamer there, it reads as very authentic, like, which again doesn't necessarily cancel out the possibility he might have hurt her, but his expression of love feels very overwhelming and very authentic. And then you cut to a photo of Laura that he has on his desk that is the weirdest photo that you would have of someone on your desk. I mean, not only is it weird that he would have a photo of his daughter's friend on his desk to begin with, you'd think that, like, a hardcore detective might have maybe made a note of that earlier on in the investigation. But anyway, the photo of Laura is, she's quite angry looking in the photo. She's quite defiant. Like, she has this look on her face of almost disappointment and, like, standoffishness. And I just find that a really, and then Lynch cuts to a close-up of it at one point that sort of fills the screen. And I find it maybe a really, again, an interesting example of what we've been talking about here, this sort of dual, or not even dual, like multiplicitous version of Laura that we have.
Right. Well, and a guy like Ben, there's absolutely no reason he wouldn't just look at that photo and say, look how beautiful she is in this photo.
Exactly.
Like, that's very much the feeling that we get from him holding it. He wouldn't necessarily notice that she looks angry or haunted or standoffish or anything. He just sees, oh, there's that beautiful girl that I had sex with who then died.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yes, yet another character trying to sort of lay claim to that particular relationship. And like I said, it should not work. It should absolutely have not worked. Chances are, if that sequence had landed in someone else's lap, it probably would not have worked. But damn it, they got me. They got me. I felt like such a sucker.
The one that gets me every time, Simon, like tears every time, is the scene after between Norma and Shelley at the diner. Yeah, where Shelley is saying to Norma, "I have to quit." I that scene every time, like tears. Machen Amick is so good in it, as is Peggy Lipton.
Yes,
but it just like I'll say again, like in relation to what I said earlier, maybe about this idea of like there being these sort of spaces of love that the show and Lynch does such a good job of sort of marking out. And you know, Lynch famously, like I think Dennis Lim talks about this a lot in the book, like Lynch maybe famously kind of takes these sort of love moments in his material almost to an extreme, like almost to the point where it's jokey. Like in things like Blue Velvet, right? I mean, this idea of a kind of naive innocence, caring between characters is often almost a joke. But I don't find that that's what's going on in sequences like this one with Norma and Shelley. I just find it to be this unbelievable scene of two women who like care for each other and love each other and want to take care of you. I just find it heartbreaking. I don't know about you, Simon.
I particularly, Peggy Lipton really blows me away in that sequence. Just her maternal warmth and which is very much aided by what feels like an unfamiliar theme, courtesy of Badalamenti. Like it feels like a new theme. Just a beautiful, beautiful sequence. And it doesn't feel loaded in the ways that a lot of other stuff on this show feels like, where it's trying to do a bunch of stuff at once. It feels like it's one of those rare instances where it's just committing to one emotion wholeheartedly. And maybe that's another reason that it works so well, because it's not, you know, the Ben sequence that happens right before is so complex and ambiguous, and, you know, we could take it any number of ways. But to go from that to this like just purely lovely sequence is good writing.
It's true. And I kind of don't think, I mean, like I'd have to go back and double check because I can't keep all the episodes in my head, but I do feel like these moments between Shelley and Norma that are so lovely are specific to Lynch episodes, right? I'm not sure you get them in the same kind of way. I mean, I'm not even sure they turn up in the writing as often, but then even more than that, I'm not sure you get this sort of like really deep level of just a kind of, I don't know, impressive emotional impact and, I don't know, attention or something is I think those sequences end up being in the Lynch episodes, which is interesting. But anyway, and then of course the camera pans over to Super Nadine and Ed, which I like. I think the Super Nadine stuff works in this episode. I don't think it's bad. I think it's actually one of the few moments where Super Nadine is interesting and brings something to the episode. But I don't know. What do you think, Simon?
My literal exact wording in my notes is the only good Ed plus Super Nadine sequence.
All right, so we're on the same page. Yes.
Yeah. Some combination of, oh God. I mean, I think actually this reminds me of a weird thing from maybe 3 or 4 episodes ago. Do you remember how there was a sequence where Norma and Hank talk about how she needs to call Ed to ask him a favor that has to do with the restaurant critic being there?
Yeah.
And then we don't see it.
Yeah.
That's like there's something that didn't make the cutting room floor. Like I don't know if that shows up in deleted scenes anywhere, but it does feel like they haven't been doing the most they can with the Norma and Ed stuff, and this just brings it roaring back with, again, Peggy Lipton just exuding such warmth in this just pathos-ridden, but also completely ridiculous sequence that comes to a head with, you know, obviously the bloody milkshake, which I feel like blood and chocolate milkshake is like the ultimate Lynch concoction.
Yeah, that and Leo drooling down his face later are both like really Lynch touches there. No, I mean, I think the Nadine sequence, I think you're right that you really feel it when Ed and Nadine come back to the fore in the narrative here, and you're like, oh, I remember you guys as characters that I loved and have missed for episodes, and yes. I am really glad that you're back. I mean, it does confuse me a little bit as to sort of like where they went as characters. I mean, again, like we've given many minutes to Dick Tremaine and these other characters that you're like, they have no why, and yet they couldn't sort of, and I'm not sure if that was just simply reticence to kind of rely too much on these melodramatic tropes that Lynch had set up, right? I mean, because in a melodrama, you basically just have characters, like these characters are the sort of types, right? There's these two types of the people who want to be together, the doomed lovers, and they cannot be together. And, and in a true melodrama, you just sort of milk that, like, forever. It's unabashed kind of milking of this impossible position that they're in. And, Lynch is masterful at it. It always, the emotion never drains out of it. It's like the emotion is made stronger every time we return to it. Again, at least when Lynch is doing it. But I think they're wonderful. I do think part of the reason why the Nadine scene works here is, and I'm not sure if this is Frost or Lynch, but somebody here maybe has remembered or figured out why there was ever any thinking in the first place of turning Nadine into like a teenager in her memory. And it is because it allows you to get at this sort of like pathos of the Ed and Nadine situation, or the Ed and Norma situation, right? I mean, Nadine is able to sort of call it out and verbalize it and put it on the table in a way that I think that for any other reasons they'd sort of run out of ways to do. And I do think that there is like the look on Norma's face when Nadine is like, oh, I know you guys broke up and Eddie and I are going out now. And Peggy Lipton is she is a true kind of, melodramatic actress, like the person who can just give waves of sort of pain and depth, but show so little of it. I don't know. It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, you said that it explains Super Nadine. I mean, it explains why she has reverted to being a teenager. It doesn't really explain the superpowers.
You're right. It does not explain the superpowers. Never clear as to why that was a necessary idea. Never clear.
Yeah.
Anyway. It's true. And who knows if anybody ever was thinking about this stuff in the first place, but between Lynch and Frost, they definitely managed to find a way to put it to kind of like emotional logic use in a way that is very much appreciated here. Yeah.
I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, but I just wanted to briefly mention, I was going back through those IRC chats and we were discussing last week, Mr. Toshimura and anyone being fooled by the costume. As it turns out, some people at the time were. Because there were people saying, so that's clearly Catherine Martell, right? And then like one or two other people would be like, nah, you're crazy. Which is very funny to read now. And it's very funny to read the postings for this episode where people are like, yeah, I was an idiot. So yeah, Jack Nance and some people on the internet were fooled. So I guess it wasn't a total failure.
I guess they worked it out. Yeah, that's true. It is funny that they decided to do this revelation of Catherine in this episode, because it's like, I mean, that scene works super well. And again, like Lynch brings sort of beautiful lighting and staging to that sequence and everything. And Piper Laurie is great in it, but it falls so far below like the priority of everything else that's going on in this episode. You kind of think maybe they could have waited until next week or something. Like it might have gotten a little more attention. But anyway, we should keep this going, because I can't wait to talk about the last half of this episode, because it's unbelievable.
I have one last thing to talk about before we get to the. It's not even the last half. It's really the last like 8 minutes of the episode.
Well, the stuff with the first cut to Sarah and the record player in the chair and Sarah happens like 15 minutes away from the end, at least maybe 20 minutes away from the end. But anyway,
yeah. And we also get the shot of Sarah crawling down the stairs.
Yes.
About midway through. And then the real fun kicks off fairly late in the episode, which we'll get there, I promise. We'll get to the fireworks factory. I wanted to briefly.
Get to the fireworks factory.
I briefly wanted to mention. You already mentioned the Leo sequence, but oh man.
Yeah.
The
Bobby screaming like a girl. It's back. I love it.
Anytime Bobby screams, it's a good episode. I think that someone should check on that as a fact, but I think it's true. I don't know if other directors would have had the cojones to have Leo talking like a 7-year-old girl about his shoes, and then having that be like a source of like primal terror for Bobby and Shelley. But
Well, at the beginning, it's not that he says new shoes at the beginning. First, he starts screaming. Like, first Leo starts shrieking, which is what makes them jump up, and then it turns into the spit up plus new shoes.
New shoes.
So I'm not just, so Simon, I think we should recalibrate what you said earlier and say, is this Eric Duray's best performance so far in this episode?
I mean, I think it might be. It depends on if the drool is real or not. Or if it was makeup and props.
That's true.
I guess we may never know. All right, so let me quickly scan through my notes to think if there's anything else I want to mention before we get into just the terror. And
because there's a lot that goes on. Like, it's like we build up to the terror, so there's a few sequences still to come before we get to the really crazy stuff. Because we get this first cut to the record player, the chair, and I'll say the reason I'm saying the record player is because it's such a distinctive like sonic element of this sequence. So for people who don't remember, it cuts to this sequence inside the kind of living room space of the Palmer house, and the record has been left to run, and so you just get the record looping and popping and looping and popping. And then Lynch starts doing unbelievable things, like he'll cut to a shot of the chair in the living room, but he'll be at ground level, and the camera will just sort of snake backwards from the chair on the ground. And you have no idea what's going on, and it's terrifying. And at this point, we have no context for anything. We have no context for what's happening. Camera pans over. We see Sarah Palmer crawl into the frame, and then we cut, and we go back to the police station. And Coop and Truman are depositing Ben Horne at the police station, and then Margaret turns up, the log lady, which is a great sequence as well with Margaret. The owls are in the roadhouse or something, she says.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something there worth talking about before we even get to the style stuff. The fact that so many of these characters end up converging on the roadhouse, which it's very rare to have. I think there's something like a dozen main or recurring characters are in that space at the same time. You've got James and Maddie having their heart-to-heart, and you also have Bobby at the bar just like chugging it back.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, apparently, the actor who plays Bobby, he has talked in interviews about the fact that he wasn't supposed to be in that sequence. He just decided to go to set that day to hang out, and Lynch saw him and was like, "Oh, get in makeup and then get to the bar and just look sad." That was what happened. So that's why you have Bobby in that sequence, which is fantastic, because the sequence would be different. Like, it would not work the same way without that many of the characters there.
Even though it doesn't make sense that he's at a bar drinking because he's like 18, but whatever. We're choosing to ignore it, and also like everyone's 25, so it's fine. Dana Ashbrook, that's his name.
There we go, of course, yeah.
So everyone kind of is made to either converges or is made to converge on the roadhouse for this sequence. I mean, even Julie Cruz is there. She got the memo, and that's from a plot standpoint. And I don't think we want to spend too much time thinking about Twin Peaks as a plot show, but I think if it had aired more recently, this probably would have been made a bigger deal of. The fact is that, like, these supernatural forces could have done lots of things. It could have, for instance, told Cooper to go to the Palmer house. But instead, I'm not complaining. I'm just pointing this out. It gets everyone converging on this sort of other space where Cooper has this kind of elegiac moment of realization, and it's there's been a decision made that these forces they're going to comment, but they're not going to intervene, and that's an interesting decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think I hadn't even really thought about that stuff. I suppose for many viewers that those kinds of things would be a real question, because, like, obviously, I think I've talked about this at some point in the past where I said stuff about how, like, the giants clues to Coop are not clues that would be like directive. Like, they're not going to tell Coop, oh, if you go here at this time, then you're going to be able to do X. Like, it's nothing like that. It's always a kind of retrospective knowledge that comes out of what these guys are able to offer from this other sort of dimension. Like, it's always confirmatory. It's always like, okay, well, here's something, you're suspecting something, the event happens, and then we point backwards towards it and say, yes, that is what happened, which is again, a certain kind of like, there's a long tradition in sort of classical literature and everything, of that being a form of, it's like prophecy. Prophecy doesn't tell you what's going to happen. Prophecy only becomes clear after the event has happened. And so there is very much something like that going on there. It never even occurs to me to think about those kinds of questions of like how of that, but I guess that does make sense. I have my own reading for why I think it is that Lynch and Frost structure that sequence where Coop and everyone else end up at the bar and not doing something else. And we can either maybe let's come back to that actually in a little while, because I feel like should we just maybe run quickly through the revelation and just sort of get that on the table, and then we can dig into all of this stuff.
All right. So Andy did it. Who saw it coming? Actually, a lot of people were guessing Andy.
No, they weren't really?
Yeah, they were. People were.
God.
I mean, obviously the main guesses were Leland and Ben, but the third most popular guess that I saw was Andy, which is hilarious.
God, people are so distrusting of poor Andy. He's so nice. Oh.
He was using all those Post-its to cover up the holes in his heart.
It's like he could orchestrate this sort of murder of this girl in this complicated way and get away with it, but he can't step out of the way of a log that he steps on and then it hits him in the face.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. So. Yes. Yeah. So the entire structuring mystery of the show is solved. 7 episodes into a 22 episode season, which was obviously a great idea.
Yeah. So this is the story. I mean, I think it's pretty familiar to people who are familiar with Twin Peaks, but we should run through it again generally, which is that the studio had started to put pressure on Lynch and Frost, I think even during first season, but it was becoming more explicit in the second season that they were being dragged into meetings and being told the killer of Laura Palmer needs to be revealed sooner rather than later. This has to end soon. And they were effectively forced into it. And I mean, it really does seem like they, really had no other choice. So they do this and they reveal Laura's killer in this part of the episode, part of the season, even though they had very much wanted to wait until later to do that. And it's interesting because, I think you mentioned this last week even, Simon, but the network had been really heavily promoting this episode by saying, this week, finally, Laura Palmer's killer is going to be revealed. Finally, this very sort of ridiculous way.
Finally, 12 months into the show airing.
Exactly. You've waited all this time, finally. So Laura's killer is going to be revealed. So they'd marketed it pretty heavily. And then there actually was a really pronounced ratings jump in this week's episode. The previous week, it had been something like 11 million. If I'm remembering, it had been 11 million. This week, it was 17 million. So it was sort of back up to its more consistent numbers from season 1. 16, 17 million had been the average in season 1. And so there was a jump with that, and it hangs on a little bit for next week, and then the numbers go down dramatically. But I think you wanted to mention something about the ratings with Simon with the night too, right?
Well, yeah, as I understand it, and people can correct me and will correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I believe starting with season 2, and I'm looking at the dates on Wikipedia, and it does seem like it aired regularly each week. They were moved to a Saturday time slot, which, if for anyone who doesn't know anything about scheduling television, Saturday is not a night you schedule television you want people to watch. It's not a time slot that screams, "Hey, we have great confidence in what you're doing. Please keep it up." It's sort of the opposite of that. It's not quite the Friday night death slot that was so often described as happening to some Joss Whedon stuff, for instance, throughout the 90s, but it's pretty close.
Yep, it was. I think as Dennis Lim puts it in his book, because I was just reviewing it this morning, it was seen as a bid to euthanize the show, to kind of let it just go away quietly. And I think, the network. I mean, I've always read this as the network really wanted to force Lynch and Frost to give the show a conclusion, and then they wanted it gone. Then they really wanted to get rid of it. So, I don't know, and we'll keep talking in weeks going forward, I guess, about how that unfolds. But
they wanted to get back to making those nice shows like they used to make.
Exactly. Back when television was wholesome. So anyway, so that's the framing story for what was going on in this week. And yeah, I still don't think we've said it, right? But after after you get a couple of sequences at the Roadhouse, and the final sequences of the episode cut back and forth between all of the characters at the Roadhouse and what's going on at the Palmer house, back and forth. It is revealed that after Sarah Palmer sees a vision of a white horse on the ground and then passes out, and that vision of the white horse to this day is still amazing. Like, it's great. Anyway, she passes out, cuts back to the Roadhouse, and we cut back, and we get one of the more infamous shots in the history of Twin Peaks, which is shot of Leland standing in front of a mirror, sort of ignoring Sarah on the floor, and you're already freaking, like, something's already wrong there, right? And then you cut to Leland, cut back to the mirror, and in the mirror is Bob. And so this is, of course, the reveal of Leland finally as Bob. And it's not, pleasant. This is not fun.
If you think that's not pleasant, dear viewers, wait a minute or two, because it gets a lot less pleasant.
So I feel like we're still circling around these scenes because they're, for people who maybe haven't reviewed the episode so recently or only vaguely remember them, these are not easy scenes to talk about. Like, they're difficult scenes to watch. I mean, I think this is one of the best episodes of television ever made. I think it is unbelievable. I mean, I think the balance and the movement between the horrific sequence with Leland being revealed as Bob, Maddie walking down the stairs, all of this amazing work with the spotlights. Like, for people who don't remember, the sequence consists of cutting back and forth between the version where it's Frank Silva and the version where it's Ray Wise, and the two men are mapped onto each other. But as you cut to Frank Silva as Bob, there's always a spotlight that's beaming down on them, which I think, as you said earlier, Simon, Lynch as a visual storyteller, and a sonic storyteller too, but visual storyteller is on such perfect display here, because in the spotlight, you have a link of Bob to the giant, who appears via spotlight on the stage in the Roadhouse. So you have this sort of otherworldly, like, connection there already. But you also have something really interesting going on with this idea of the spotlight as, this bright white light, like the light at the end of the tunnel, this light, like this idea that brightness is supposed to indicate goodness or something. And here it is the opposite. Here it is this, like, pitiless horror that just sort of makes the blood show up more. I mean, I find the sequence insane. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I swear to God, I'm not trying to pull rank when I say that, Kate, I've watched more television than you have.
Simon, yeah, I will totally give you that honor. You have that crown. You have watched so much more television than I have.
Yeah, I did like 160 episodes of the Televerse or something, and other reasons. It's just, I've seen a lot of television. And I completely concur with you that this is one of the greats, not just of this show, but in general. And, it's telling that one of the criticisms, so often when shows are violent, they get that very predictable criticism thrown at them of, oh, they're glorifying violence, or they're being sensationalistic. And you know what? Maybe if someone wants to dip into the press archives of 1990, they can find counter evidence. But I have never read anyone saying that Twin Peaks glorifies violence, or that that anything about what's going on is sexy or alluring.
It's interesting though, Simon, because I do know that this narrative of Lynch favoring a certain kind of storyline that involves battered women and involves damaged women and hurting women, this sort of sadistic impulse of his art.
Sure.
That comes up with some regularity. I mean, it's not necessarily, it certainly isn't the same claim as Twin Peaks, like, glorifies violence in this scenario. And I personally think it's the opposite, and we can keep talking about that. But there is definitely, and there has been criticisms of Twin Peaks. They get worse when we get to Fire Walk with Me, but there were criticisms of, Twin Peaks, these episodes, as, a certain kind of, reveling in, like, getting mileage out of, getting, profit or attention out of brutalizing a woman on screen. I certainly don't think it's that simple at all. But anyway.
No, I would agree with that, obviously. I mean, I'm not really inclined anymore to, I think maybe at a time I was. I'm less inclined the older I get to sort of evaluate art on these, like, black and white moral terms. Yeah. I just think it's boring. But, certainly, I mean, that was sort of one of the main criticisms behind, you know, Roger Ebert's original pan of Blue
Velvet.
Velvet. And I think that was maybe even the source of those criticisms, the original source. But I mean, I don't know. I feel like you can't look at a sequence like the one where obviously where Madeline dies. I mean, it's just such a beautiful and incredibly executed sequence. That is obviously, I mean, it's horrible for what it contains, but like I guess I can't bring myself to condemn a sequence that features, you know, these sites that are so iconic. You know, the things like these details that, like, where did they come from? Like Madeline's bloody teeth. Like, that's what always stands out to me, because it never occurs to anyone when you know, you see a sequence of someone being beaten, man or woman, that, like, yeah, why wouldn't your mouth be full of blood? And I'm not praising Twin Peaks for its realism. That would be a very strange thing to do. But there's just these Lynch and his crew, and I mentioned this with the nails the other day. You know, they find these new unexplored angles of sort of savagery, and find ways to sort of pepper it in, and in ways that wouldn't, like, it makes sense to me that the stuff in this episode didn't run afoul of censors, because, you know, the actual content frame by frame is not necessarily any more violent than other stuff that would have been airing at the time, and certainly stuff that would be airing even a couple years later. It's just these ways, these sort of, for lack of a better word, novel ways that Lynch finds to just dial up the cruelty of that sequence.
It also just goes to show how much those sorts of things, like standards and practices and censor boards and stuff, how absolutely fundamentally ill-equipped they are as a concept generally. Like, we just put that on the record, but particularly in relation to somebody like Lynch, because the frameworks that they tend to, like, apply to things have nothing to do with these questions of a kind of phenomenal experience, an effective experience, like the sound, like the fact that the sound in these sequences is 80% of what is going on, is the sound, is you know, the famous Lynch drone, Maddie screams, the way everything is slowed down. I mean, that's another one of those amazing stylistic choices that Lynch uses here, which is when you're in the Ray Wise version of The Killing, the sound and the tempo are, like, regular. And then when you move into the Bob version, the sound has been stretched to mimic this kind of, like, painful slow motion that, anyway, all to say that, you know, like, boards like the censor boards, they're so based on this idea of content and, like, a certain very clear idea of you must see X doing Y, or X must say Y, or blah, blah, blah. They have no framework to be able to say, wow, this sound is, like, an existential nightmare. You know, like, that you can't do that. It's not you can't censor that. So, I mean, you could, I guess, but they don't.
Yeah, this sequence of extreme violence can only be shown at regular speed. If you slow it down to you know, 75 or 80% so that everything's blurring, it's at that point too disturbing. And I mean, maybe they have made calls like that for other films, but you're right. It's these measures are arbitrary and these institutions are useless.
Yeah, there are so many things going on in this sequence that have nothing to do with a certain kind of regular idea of violence, for one thing. I mean, it's particularly with the sequence, I find it is less upsetting for an idea that you're watching, like, an external body that is Maddie. It's less upsetting for the idea that you're watching someone be hit and you're kind of feeling it in your own body, or, you know, like that mode that so many action films get mileage out of, right? I mean, even something like John Wick, where it's like people's legs are being broken or whatever, and you're like, oh, you know, you feel it in your legs. This is not what's going on here at all. Instead, it's that Lynch is creating this unbelievable, effective space where, and, you know, this is problematic. Like, I think people will be listening and they maybe won't agree with me, or they'll think that this is a failed experiment. But I think that what Lynch is trying to do is to open up this space of a certain kind of empathy where you're not experiencing exactly what Maddie is experiencing. That would be sympathy. You're not experiencing that. You are feeling your way into what is going on here. You are being like radically opened on to this kind of like really unsettling space and having to be in it with Maddie. And I mean, honestly, Simon, those sequences where you cut to Bob and he's like sucking on her chin and it's like unbearable to watch. I mean, it is so painful, and it has nothing to do with like a body being hit or something on screen. Although I will say the sounds of Maddie's like gurgles once Maddie's been punched by Ray Wise and she's sort of gurgling and coughing are just like, oh, they are some of the most unsettling sounds, I think, that I have seen or heard on television.
Something that Lynch does that the other directors don't really have a sense for is he's got a sense of how to place bodies in space in relation to each other that is just wrong. Like and it's all sort of portended by the sequence of Sarah crawling down the stairs, where even before we see her get down there, we're already at a low angle on the living room floor. We're already keyed into, wait, I shouldn't be looking at this space from down here. And then we see Sarah just crawling. It's worth mentioning Grace Zabriskie is horrifically underused on this series, and I'd forgotten how little airtime she gets, but she makes the most of it in this episode. And I feel like that sequence clues us into, obviously it keys you in that something very wrong is going to happen in that space. But also just the way you mentioned, Bob and the stuff that he does to Maddie, and it's like no one, like, to have the imagination to think, okay, well at this point he's like a lion toying with his prey. That more than a man assaulting a woman. I mean, that's Lynch, for better or worse, can tap into that, where other people lack the imagination, and whether or not it's a good thing to have that kind of imagination is, I guess, up to the viewer.
Good question. I mean, I think there's another interesting thing there, and I'll maybe just open this up here and we can come back to it next week, because I think it's going to make more sense to talk about all these questions next week. But you also do get this aspect of the Bob, Leland, Maddie triangle here, where you have Leland regularly saying things like, Laura, my darling, Laura, my baby. And this opens up this question that's going to become increasingly important going forward, well, for a while, and then the series inexplicably kind of drops it. But is this question of this sort of maybe like line between Bob and Leland, like where it begins, where it ends, and does it matter? And my general approach to a lot of this stuff, as people may have figured out, is that it doesn't really matter. We don't need to have some kind of code or like rule book that says like, oh, well, Leland is a body and there's an inhabiting spirit and we can clearly like draw a line between them. It's like, that isn't really the point. But I do think there is something very painful in that moment where he's sort of crying out, Laura, my baby, Laura, my darling, because it doesn't really matter if it's Bob saying those words or if it's Leland saying those words. What matters is the kind of unbearable agony of the fact that here in these sequences, love is revealed very much to be destructive and brutalizing, and for those things to not have a clear boundary between them. And, you flash back to Leland earlier in the episode saying to Maddie, we love you. Like, of course we understand you have to leave. And this question of, well, was he Bob or was he Leland? And again, it doesn't matter. Like, Lynch is finding this space in which love becomes brutality and brutality seems to have love. And it's such an unsettling kind of revelation that, of course, like, extends and mirrors this practical real reveal that we have here, which is the reveal of incest, right? I mean, this incredible, brutal running over of a line that should be drawn between two bodies is here. Love is destruction. I just find it amazing on every kind of level, the way in which this is brought out here.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out, obviously, that the way this sequence is executed, more than anything we've seen, I think, previous, really points a line for his future work. Like, that this sequence absolutely predicts, the darkest the darkest and the most intense moments of Mulholland Drive and even Inland Empire. And if you like this sequence and you want to see it drawn on for like long periods of time, aesthetically and otherwise, boy, do we have some movies to recommend to you.
That's true. Well, and we'll have our discussion of Fire Walk with Me too, which should very much dig into some of that stuff as well. Honestly, Simon, like I think I could write a book like about this episode. And there has been a lot of academic writing, I think, about this episode, like many good things. But there's a couple of things I wanted to point out here that connect to other ideas that we've been talking about with Lynch throughout. So, one is I'll reference something we talked about more in season 1, which was this differentiation that's maybe at work in the show and the way it approaches like questions of detectiveness and like empiricism and all of this stuff and knowledge. And I thought it was interesting watching this episode, the way that, so much of horror, like as a genre, seems to function around the idea of horror living in the unknown, like in what cannot be known, like whether it's who's behind that door, or like where is the ghost in the house or any of these things, or what's going to jump out and kill me. That's usually where horror lives. And Lynch has done such a great job of sort of playing with that up to this point, it being beyond the edge. And then I think there's something amazing that Lynch does here where he says, actually, sometimes it's more horrific to know. Like sometimes it's worse to know. Like knowledge is not safety. Knowledge is not going to give you a kind of reprieve from the world being an appalling place. And I think that's fascinating. And then I think it maybe moves into, again, back to this sort of other move that Lynch is making throughout the episode, which is, so then what is a kind of reprieve, or what is the thing that's given to us against this horror? And it is these spaces of, I don't want to say an opposing affect because I think purposely he's blending them, but, what we might want to call positive affects, right? Like love and, empathy and sorrow for things you love. I mean, and this, of course, brings us to the scene we haven't talked about at all, which is a bummer because they are such amazing sequences, all of them, which are the sequences in the roadhouse. Mm-hmm. Yes. Because as Maddie is being killed, the events that are happening in the roadhouse are, God, they're really difficult to explain, but at some point you get the world's most decrepit waiter or whatever appears again magically, comes up to Cooper and reaches out to him and says, I'm so sorry. And I'm actually, oh my God, Simon, I'm forgetting now if you get this move, I think you get this move towards the kind of like emotional buildup of everyone becoming sorrowful. I think you get that after Coop has received the visit from the giant on the stage, right? Is that how that works?
I believe so.
Or is it reversed? Yeah, okay, so Cooper gets the visit from the giant on the stage, and then the guy comes over and says, I'm sorry. And after that, after the guy says, I'm sorry to Cooper, it's like the whole episode is weeping. It's like every aspect of that space in the roadhouse is weeping. Donna breaks down crying. Bobby looks, heartbroken sitting at the bar. And, Lynch, it's never made explicit, of course. Like, it's never as simple as like, oh, they're telepathically understanding that something is happening. It's never made that simple. And it's all the more interesting for the fact that it isn't. It's simply, the episode itself, it's the show itself, bemoaning what can't be done, like what isn't fixed. But it also has this space of like just this element of love, like particularly with Lara Flynn Boyle, like weeping over Laura or weeping over the world. I mean, there is such a sense of kind of, like love there still that I find amazing. But yeah, go ahead. And then I have one more thing I wanted to add.
Well, it's almost, I hate to go here, but it's almost like a metatextual moment of, hey, so we had this nice show that we wanted to do, and we had a plan for it, and then, life happened. So we're going to, it feels like an ending. Like, it feels like a send-off. Yeah. Like, if the show could have gotten canceled, basically, after that episode, and that sequence in the Roadhouse where all these characters, and even Julie Cruz are there, to sort of give you some of that old time Twin Peaks, cocoon feeling, maybe for the last time. And it feels like a send off for sort of their original vision in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think it's, and the interesting thing there is that the send off looks exactly like the pilot, right? It's like there hasn't been any kind of forward motion. I mean, I think that's actually really important, is like this reveal happens where all of a sudden we're given this knowledge of Leland being the killer, and yet nothing is really different. And I think that matters, right? I mean, because the whole point, and we're going to get this maybe more, becomes clearer in the episodes going forward, but there is like a real challenge to the viewer here, even to all of a sudden be saddled with this knowledge of this character that's been in front of you the whole time, has been this sort of horrifying monster. And you've never noticed and this is the way that it is. But it also means that like now that nothing is different. You're still in this space where we're weeping over this girl who's been brutalized. We're weeping over the fact that we couldn't fix it. We're weeping over the fact that nothing has changed. And knowing, again, that Leland is the killer does not solve the problem. Like, it doesn't heal the space of the town. It doesn't save Maddie. I mean, I think this is, again, this like important distinction between a certain kind of like viewers thinking, well, if I know who killed Laura Palmer, then that's going to solve everything and I don't have to keep being bothered by any of this stuff. And Lynch is really pushing against that. Again, it's like, this is not an easy answer on any level. This is not doing the thing you want it to do. It doesn't make it better to know who the killer was.
Yeah.
Which I think is great.
I completely agree. I'm going to do something a little bit weird, and I've been I've been reading up a little bit about John Berger, the English art critic, since he died.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe you know this quote, Kate, but he had he passed away recently, and he had a quote about death that has been making the rounds a lot, and I couldn't help but thinking about it when we were watching that sort of very elegiac sequence in the Roadhouse. So I'm just going to read it. That's going to be my last contribution to this episode. What reconciles me to my own death more than anything else is the image of a place. A place where your bones and mine are buried, thrown, uncovered together. They are strewn there pell-mell. One of your ribs leans against my skull. A metacarpal of my left hand lies inside your pelvis. Against my broken ribs, your breast like a flower. The 100 bones of our feet are scattered like gravel. It is strange that this image of our proximity, concerning as it does mere phosphate of calcium, should bestow a sense of peace. Yet it does. With you, I can imagine a place where to be phosphate of calcium is enough.
Oh, man. John Berger. Well, now I can't follow that, but well, I'll still wedge in my last point,
Yes.
But I do think that should be acknowledged that is, not so easy to follow. But yeah, there's definitely something in there, this kind of connection with, oh God, I can't even describe it. Let's just let the quote speak for itself. It's amazing. But,
Okay.
I hinted at it earlier, so I feel like I should,
Go for it.
explain this in case anybody was interested to hear about this. But I think there is something to be said for the fact that this episode is structured so that Coop and, the other townspeople, characters, etc., don't end up like that. There is never any kind of even hint at the idea that somebody could have told them that it was Leland and Maddie, and then they need to go there again. Right? I mean, you get the giant saying it is happening again, but there's no information beyond that. There's no other possibility. And I find it really fascinating that what you end up having here is a sequence where all of these characters of the town are effectively put in the position of the spectator. Mm-hmm. Like they are sitting at the bar spectating an event. They know something wrong is happening. Like they feel it. They know something bad is happening, and they don't move. They don't get up. They weep. And mm-hmm. I find there to be something really important and really interesting going on with what Lynch is doing here, because the Coop particularly, he seems to be the most aware, maybe reflects the kind of position that we're in as viewers. And I think Lynch is doing something really interesting, which is that we're watching this horrible thing unfold in front of us with Maddie. And of course we know, right? We even have more knowledge than these other characters. We know what's happening and we can't do anything about it. And I mean, this is like the kind of moral and ethical problem of living in late capitalism generally, right?
Yes,
I mean, everybody can
feel
it since,
again.
Yes, we did, like fucking since Trump, right? I mean, we live in a world where we know that things are wrong, and sometimes the best we can do is be empathetic. Like sometimes that is the best we can often offer. We are not in positions where we can run out and fix the world. And I think there is something beautiful to the fact that Lynch is both acknowledging that as like a human reality, mm-hmm. that this empathy is this is what we have to offer, and it matters. It's not to be dismissed. Like it's an important thing, and all the worse for people who can't feel it, right? Who can't even do that. Mm-hmm. But then on the other hand, that it's kind of a tragedy. Like this is the tragedy of the world that we live in, that we can't do everything. We can't fix everything. And what we're left with is the ability to feel sad over it. And this is like feel devastated more. And this is what we have. And I don't know. I think if that isn't like an artistic kind of statement. And like a political statement. But anyway, yes.
The last thing I will note is that I don't think it's for nothing that, not only are all these characters assembled in the Roadhouse, but he's assembled basically all of the quote good characters. None of the schemers are there. None of the, Ben Horn. There's no Josie. There's no one who's actually murdered anyone. It's really all the normies of Twin Peaks are there basically.
There's also something really fascinating too about the fact that those characters effectively are the characters that are left as the ones who loved Laura once you remove her parents from the situation, right? I mean, there's something really heartbreaking about that, and we'll have to talk about it next week, but the question of Sarah Palmer and her relationship to all of this as Laura's mother is, I think is like a really interesting kind of overall aspect of the show that isn't really dealt with. Like, it's there in the show and it's worth picking apart. But yeah, this idea that Laura, it's been revealed to the audience that Laura had lost her parents long before she was killed. Like, Laura was on her own long before she was killed. And it puts a different level onto this relationship with these other people who are there, right? James and Donna, and Bobby. Like, it gives them maybe more weight or something in their relationship to them, which is really interesting too, right? Because those shows are usually so much about the parents as this kind of like unassailable center of the grief process. And it's like this episode completely changes that in a certain kind of way, which is really interesting. Anyway.
So yeah, I guess that's just about it from us. We've gone a teensy bit long and indulged ourselves, but that's our prerogative. So deal with it, I guess.
That's right. We had to talk about Lynch because we won't get Lynch again until the finale, so we had to give him some space.
Yeah, the next few episodes of the podcast are going to be very different. Is all I have to say.
The next two episodes are still pretty decent. So yes. If people are like, "Oh, I'm not going to get through these," like, stick with it for a little while. We're still a few episodes away from the more grueling,
from the churning suck. Yeah.
Churning suck.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And even when we get to the churning suck, it's going to at least be funny. I promise. Anyway, yes. Thank y'all for listening. Do rate, review, subscribe on iTunes. We need all those things for our egos, our precious, frail egos. And do visit sortedcinema.com and follow us on Twitter. I'm at HollowMinds. Kate is at Cinnamont. C-I-N-E-M. Wait, no.
E-N-T.
C-I-N-E-M-E-N-T.
Yes.
I did it. All right. And that's it. Thank you all so much for listening. We will be back in a week's time.